All right, hi, my name's Hannah Crouthamel.
Mason Simpkins.
And I'm Gus Tarity.
And this is our podcast where we will be discussing how the perception of witches has gone from fear and persecution to celebration and female empowerment. We also have two guests here today who know nothing about witchcraft, so we will be teaching them.
Yay!
Absolutely.
All right, so for our first section of this podcast, we're going to be talking about the rise of witch hunts and witch hunts in their,
It's fun. It's a podcast.
it is. Fuck me. All right, so in this first part, I'm going to be talking about the rise of witch hunts and them and their popularity, okay? So my first question to you all is, do you believe in witchcraft?
I kind of, I guess, simply in, I guess, like, as a religion, because I know there's, like, pagan and Wiccan and stuff like that, but, I don't know, I don't know. It's very much, like, maybe
Yes.
on that, because...
Yes. Mason?
I'm on a no. I'm on a no.
No.
I don't believe in any of like the weird. Weird might be offensive. I don't know, but like Bigfoot, that type of thing.
Yes,
the Loch Ness monster. It feels like in the same vein as that, and I have no issue with people who do believe in it. It's just not me. It's not
Yes. Our guests, do you have anything to say about witchcraft, whether you believe or not?
I personally think witchcraft is fake.
not helpful.
No comment.
Okay.
Not helpful.
So I'm gonna put in some historical context because back then this was a time of magic, so witchcraft was not a crazy idea. There was often a village healer or a matchmaker, and magic was a part of everyday life. And this is a lot like our modern belief of aliens. A lot of people believe in aliens, alien abductions, all that good stuff. So it wasn't all that crazy for someone to be considered a witch back then. Now, what is a witch hunt? So this involved the identification of individuals who were believed to be engaged in secret activity, aka witchcraft, okay? And this was conducted by judicial authorities, professional witch hunters, and the population in general. Now, witch hunts often included the hunt of the witches as well as their trials and often their executions.
Who was the authority for these types of witch trials? Like, was it just the people themselves, or like was there like a central person, or like how did they decide who made that decision of whether or not someone was a witch?
Honestly, I guess it kind of depended on the situation. There were professional witch hunters, so these were people who would go village to village and kind of talk to the people of the village and be like, hey guys, like, who's the weirdo here? Who could possibly be a witch? Okay, or sometimes they would get like letters from villages being like, hey buddy, I have some people for you to get rid of, okay? Because who wants a witch in their village causing all this trouble, I guess?
A lot of it seems like it was just a hitman.
Yes.
A hit organization, the mob.
Yes. I mean, like, can you imagine nowadays having a professional alien hunter? Because I think about that a lot.
It wouldn't surprise me if we had something like that in our government,
Personally,
I could see it, but no.
This is very true. This is very true. Now, there's also another term, witch craze, which is a manifestation of frenzied, irrational, or manic forms of behavior in pursuing witches. This isn't like as often used, but it's basically someone just has a hyperfixation on killing witches. And that's where that goes. So, and I'm going to talk about someone a little later on named Matthew Hopkins. And this man had a hyper fixation on witches. So
Mental ill people are very interesting.
Yes. Now, honestly, not all magic was bad magic, okay? So there was considered a high magic, which was good magic. And this was astrology, alchemy, necromancy, and these often required an education, so these were fields for men. These men were not accused of witchcraft, and they were actually often celebrated. So That's a little crazy to me.
Quite interesting.
Right,
Seems
right.
a little sexist.
A little bit, because I kind of feel like, you know, if you could, like, make something, like, blow up, and people are like, yeah! But then, like, the village's crops fail, and everyone's like, oh, the old woman did it. You know?
Yeah.
It just seems a little,
It's a lot of, like, I'm really annoyed at Hilga today. I heard that Hilga was actually cursing the crops downtown. You didn't hear it from me, though. Like, it feels a lot like that.
Yes. Now, low magic, this is what the witches did. This was considered like black magic, so this was wishing someone was sick or dead, or that the village crops failed, or that, you know, just really anything. Maybe the plague came to town, and you really wanted that, okay? And that's what witches did. Now, there's also diabolism, which is the worship of the devil. And this is the belief that people, basically witches, made pacts with the devil, and that's how they got their powers. So, yeah, that's pretty much it with the terms, I guess. Now, you may be asking, what did witches do? Well, I mean, honestly, like, what did they do?
I mean,
right?
if people were being killed over it, they had to have been doing something, you would think. You would
Yes.
think they had to have been doing something
Something
pretty bad.
truly
you know,
horrible.
if you're going to hang them in
truly.
the street, what do they have to do?
Exactly. Now, the witches participated in something called the Witches' Sabbath, okay? This took place at night in the forest, right?
Very witchy.
Yes, very witchy. I mean, truly, who wants to be in a deep forest at night without protection? Not sure.
Is there any proof of that these...
No,
Did anyone ever see these?
No, it was more just like, oh, yeah, I saw Joanne, like, butt naked dancing with people in the woods.
Oh, well, yes, that's normal.
And people were like, oh my God! Right?
Yeah,
So.
and nudity was very taboo back then.
Oh, yes.
That was
Yes,
very
yes,
much like,
yes.
don't even show your ankle.
Yes. So scandalous. So these witches would go to the forest and they would perform an array of acts, okay? They were described as being completely naked and dancing around the woods. They would sacrifice themselves, animals, or infants. And oftentimes it was described that they would, like, eat the infants. You know, they were cannibals. They were seen as highly sexual, and it was said that they would have sexual relations with the devil and his demons on these nights. So basically, a giant orgy in the woods.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, okay, I mean, these things that, whether or not they took place, is up for... But, like, what kind of people would be a witch? Like, what's your normal witch look like?
Yes. Now, wait, so before I get into that, okay, I want to tell you my favorite fun fact. And it's that witches didn't start off flying on broomsticks. They would actually, it was described that they would go into the house of men and they would turn these men into horses and ride the horses out into the night. Flying horses, okay? And then they would return the horse to the man's house, and the man would turn back into a man.
Before anyone saw them?
Exactly.
Suspicious. Slightly.
Now, there's not really, like, solid evidence on why witches started using broomsticks. I can't really find, like there's a bunch of different theories. But the big thing is that brooms are associated with housework, which was associated with women, but also they're quite phallic looking, okay? And witches were seen as very sexual, you know. Yeah, it's just...
It's an interesting theory.
It really is. Now, Mason, what did witches look like, right? So, about 75% of the accused were women, okay? And in some places, it was as high as 90%. So, really, witches were women, okay? Now, the most, I want to say, popular jobs that women who were accused of being witches were, like, their jobs, I don't know. They were usually cooks, healers, and midwives. So they often dealt, like the healers and midwives, they dealt with death. They dealt with infants. They dealt with sickness. And it could very easily be that, you know, maybe they couldn't help heal someone died, and the family's very upset and said, you did this on purpose, you're a witch. That kind of stuff, you know? Now, they were also typically 50 years old or older. They were postmenopausal and or with grown children. So maybe they had children, maybe they weren't able to have children. Now, they were usually unmarried or widowed, so they lived by themselves, or they needed to live with, like, their children, or maybe they didn't live with anyone. They were also typically poor or depended on aid from the community, so this might have been someone who went house to house once a week and asked for food, asked for money, asked for help, someone that the village maybe just didn't like an annoyance to the village, you know? Now, most were also from small rural communities, and this is because in those communities, everyone knows everyone. And honestly, if there's one person that a bunch of people don't like, the focus really just kind of gets turned on them. So if everyone doesn't like this person, maybe they're a witch. So these witches also had sun or like aging spots, moles, bug bites, literally anything.
Like everyone has.
Yes. But it was said that when you made a pact with the devil, a spot would appear on your body. Usually they said it was like your genitals, because usually you like had sex with the devil to solidify this.
Right.
But honestly, it really didn't matter. And one thing I find interesting, apparently, when Elizabeth I was reigning in England, there was a very strong rumor, that Anne Boleyn was a witch and that the devil's mark had been spotted on her. And obviously, Anne Boleyn was unfortunately beheaded, so I guess she could never be tried as a witch, you know? And also, witches were often associated with cats, okay? So cats were associated with the devil. There was a fear that they would attract evil. And actually, during the Tudor period in England, a lot of cats were burnt or otherwise killed because of that fear. And people who owned cats were more likely to be accused of being witches.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is crazy. I really think that often cats are associated with women. I feel like cats is like a very like womanly pet.
Yeah.
You know, so
Cats also are not as like clingy as dogs.
yes.
And you know, they need to approach you first.
Yes.
So something consent, something no reason why women are associated with them.
Exactly. It's just, yeah. And also, this is why kings and queens frequently kept dogs and monkeys as pets, but not cats.
They kept monkeys.
I didn't know that either, but I was reading up on that. I have a very big fear of monkeys, guys.
Ever
really
since
hate
Travis the chimp?
Yes!
No, yeah, I would prefer a cat over a monkey.
Thank
frankly.
you. So would I. But apparently they just really didn't want to be accused of being witches.
I mean, I'm a dog person, so this wouldn't affect me. But
oh, right.
Yeah.
I'm both.
I love cats.
yes, we met Hagrid.
Yes. So, also, witches could turn themselves into animals to spy on people. They could also summon apparitions to torture people. And these often came in the form of black dogs, not cats, which I find very interesting. So if you owned a cat, you were a witch, but also there was a black dog near you, you were a witch.
I believe, because I'm pretty, black dogs, I'm pretty sure were seen as like an omen of bad luck.
Yes.
Which is really like, it's like, what, they didn't do anything wrong.
Yes. It's really a lose-lose situation here.
Yeah.
Like, if you have any pet, you're doomed.
Get like a parakeet or something.
Yes. So now I'm going to talk a bit about the trials and whatnot, okay? So I talked about Matthew Hopkins, but before Matthew Hopkins, there was a manual for conducting the trial of an accused witch. And this was basically a handbook for witch trials, okay? This was called the Malleus Maleficarum. And this was written in 1486 by Henrik Kramer. This was in Germany. So this was a manual. It was like a 3-part book. It talked about how to spot a witch, what to do with a witch. It gave specific details for the trial of a witch. Now, in this book, judges of these trials were advised to not let the witch touch them, and the witches had to be led into the courtroom backwards so that they couldn't look at the judge and bewitch him and change the events of the trial, which is crazy.
They were very paranoid.
Yes. And this book, so it went through 29 editions through 1486 to 1600, and it was accepted by both Catholics and Protestants. And this is literally during the time of England's Civil War. So this book brought them together a little bit, you know?
And I mean, 29 editions over 120 years, it wasn't even the original person anymore. So
Exactly.
Like, how
exactly.
would you're taking what he just said and running with it?
Exactly. It was, yeah. So now we're going to get to Matthew Hopkins. And I hate this man. I really hate this man, okay? So Matthew Hopkins was a professional witch finder. He was called the Witch Finder General. And he worked for about 3 years, okay? He worked from 1644 to 1647. And in 1647, he ended up dying of tuberculosis in his home alone. Okay? Exactly. Good. So, he used demonology by King James I of Scotland and later of England as his manual for his witchcraft, his witch hunts, his witch trials. Okay? This talked about the devil and how the devil corrupts men. It talked about how to find a witch and how to trial them. And this book came from personal experiences, as James I was an overseer in some of the witch trials in Scotland. Specifically, witch trials where the witches were accused of trying to kill him. And this is where the swimming test came from. This was a test that Matthew Hopkins infamously used. The subject would be tied, like their hands would be bound, their feet would be bound, so that they couldn't swim, and they would be thrown into the water. And if you sink, you die innocent, and if you float, you die a witch. You would be burned, hanged, whatever the typical fashion was, okay? So this was just a lose-lose situation.
So you're dying no matter what.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're cooked.
Yes, and this came from the thought that if you were baptized, you would sink in the water, but if you weren't and you made a pact with the devil, the holy water would repel you, and that's why you would float. Interesting torture method, you know?
The holy water as in the random rivers around.
Yes.
Very holy.
Yes, yes.
Did they ever, like, find somebody that floated? Or, like, do you think they
Yes.
they kind of went after, like, 9 tries of, like, one,
Yes,
like,
yes.
9 tries of people drowning going,
Well,
do you think we're getting any closer
Well,
here, Matthew?
I mean, we all float when we die, right?
Right.
So,
Well, I
eventually
did-
you're going to float.
exactly. Well, I did. So I read up on this one trial where this woman, they tied each of her hands to her opposite foot's big toe, which is so weird. Yes. And then they threw her in the water, and she floated to the top, and then they burned her as a witch.
This is just fetish content at this point. Are you kidding me?
I love how good the records are. That
Yes.
they know this
Yes.
down to her big toe.
Yes.
Like, thank you for providing these very
Yes.
intricate
It's very
details.
diligent.
Yes.
I appreciate
Yes,
that.
like, I'm not really sure if that's how they tied up everyone or if it was just her. It was a little weird. Yeah, so Hopkins basically used this as, like, a guideline to torture his witches. And he also used this book to get around several laws that forbade him from torturing people. Like, the water thing really wasn't legal, but he was like, well, if King James did it, I can. And this book, Demonology, was believed to be one of the main sources of inspiration used by William Shakespeare in the production of Macbeth, which I thought was very interesting.
Ooh.
I saw a lot of sources talking about that, so I thought I would bring it up. And that's pretty much it for the rise of witch hunts and witchcraft. And now we will move on to Mason.
So, at the end of the witch trials, right, it starts to... I don't know what to say, falter out, in the mid to late 17th and 18th centuries. And there was a few reasons for that. One of them would just be general skepticism and rationalization that happened. That would be the scientific revolution and all the things that happened like that kind of led people to a different way of thinking. And not that these places became any less religious in terms of that, but maybe that witchcraft was not the real reason or the real thing to fear. I think the religious shift was definitely part of it, as there was the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation. So there was kind of this both sides having this, talk. And there was a lot of theologists and other people who started to say that many of the people who were accused of being witches were never actually practicing magic, but instead were just victims of superstition.
Yes, yeah.
But another big one that really came, and I think personally I would say this is the bigger changes of the two, would be the legal reforms that happened. One of which that I can name was the Witchcraft Act.
Oh, what was that?
So the Witchcraft Act happened in 1735, and basically what it said is that it changed the penalty for witchcraft, which originally in the Witchcraft Act of 1603 was forced to be convicted by death. And so it had changed this one, 130 years later, that it was no longer, witchcraft itself was no longer punishable by death. Instead it was, just considered, you would still be punished for it, but it was more of like it was less treasonous, I guess. I don't the type of word to use. You could still be tried if you used your witchcraft for other types of crime, but you were more on the line of like a con artist or, somebody who would just rip people off. And it was mostly fines and imprisonment at that point.
Yeah. So it was less about like they actually believed in witchcraft and more of like, okay, like what are you doing?
Yeah. And that the other big thing about that act is the Witchcraft Act was for the entirety of Great Britain. So that includes Scotland and England and Ireland. So even though those places had their own witchcraft acts on the books before, this superseded all of them.
Oh.
So I think that was probably a big push back on it. And then another one is, I think that people did look at the Salem witch trials in America that happened. This was a little bit later, and a lot of witch trials had kind of started to slow down in England. But I definitely think that it was really bad when you look at what happened in Salem, and a lot of people were killed over it. And I think that most people would look at that and they said there was very little basis on a lot of these. Why did this happen and whatnot? And then after that, and those kind of three main reasons that I would give, there's kind of, at least in some opinions, I would say, this hiatus in terms of witches and the idea of witchcraft, where from all these witchcraft leading up to it, and then in the end in the 16th, 17th centuries. And then there was the American Revolution and the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s and the 1800s, and people didn't really talk so much about witches. Like, they were still there, but it was a lot less. But then you get to the 1900s, and we don't have witch trials anymore.
Right.
But we start having witches in popular media, and it becomes less like oh my lord, a witch, be scared, and then it's, well, let's make some funny cartoons about it.
Do you guys think that when like these shifts were happening, they were grandparents telling like their grandchildren, like, back in my day there were witch trials? Like, probably. And the grandchildren were like, Grandma, like, I think you need to go to sleep.
I feel like there had to have been, and there's definitely people. There's probably older people who are like, that shouldn't be on TV. You're gonna, you're getting possessed by watching it.
Right.
Do you think when the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s were happening, people were like, oh, not again?
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
So one big one that I think that everybody would know about is in The Wizard of Oz, right? There's the Wicked Witch and there's the Good Witch, right?
Yes.
So, and at least in what I can found, I'm sure maybe there were some smaller ones, but this is the first time I can really think of like a good witch example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there's the Wicked Witch, yes, and that's your stereotypical green skin, big nose with the wart on the side and the broom and stuff. But there was the Good Witch, right? I don't entirely remember all of Wizard of Oz, maybe as much as I should, but there was the Good Witch of the North or whatever, and she was pretty, and she like came in her bubble and stuff.
Like
and,
pretty and blonde.
Yeah.
And like she wore pink and stuff.
Fun fact about the stereotype for green skin and big nose, that actually ties into a lot of anti-Semitic tropes involving Jewish people.
I could see that.
Because Jewish people were stereotyped as greedy, green skin. They also, like, you know, the whole big nose thing and but little fun fact for you there.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure when The Wizard of Oz was written, but the film came out around World War II era.
Yeah. So that would have been an interesting time to think about. Obviously the book was written before that too.
Right,
so
right.
But I found that very interesting that it was, you still have the Wicked Witch, the bad portrayal, but then you have a good witch portrayal. And there was other ones as well, like the folklore of Hansel and Gretel, and there's the witch, and so that one's older. That one's definitely written in the 1800s.
Oh yeah.
But it was still kind of the bad witch, right? She was luring children into her house and baking them and cooking them and eating the children, right? You know, and that goes back to all the way what Hannah, you were saying earlier about people were being tried for the witch's Sabbath.
Yes.
And they would eat children. Yes. And that's what the witch did in Hansel and Gretel, right? It was a little bit more joking, and they cooked them into candy and cakes and stuff.
Right.
But she was still eating children, right? So
exactly.
It's kind of funny that it was along the same lines.
Yeah. I mean, it came from somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? So
it's not completely unfound. And then there was the Looney Tunes, right? There was the what was her name? The Hazel, I think, was the witch there.
Oh, yes.
So that was also in the 1950s and stuff, and it still kind of had the stereotypical, the green with the big nose and stuff. They kind of move on a little bit past that, I think, when they had the shows like Bewitched came out in the 1960s, Charmed came out in the 1990s, I believe, and those ones were a little bit more, like they were attractive witches. They weren't the stereotypical type, and
right. They weren't old women. No. They were younger.
And so it's kind of interesting how these changed over time. Even like Harry Potter, it's not the same as witchcraft, but there's witches in the movie, in the books.
I mean, it kind of is. It's it's a world of magic.
Yeah, right. And so you kind of look at it and you're like, this shift happened from the 1700s where it was we should be killing these people, or the 1600s where we should be killing these people, to then let's stop that, to then the early 1900s where we can say, let's put them in funny green costumes and a big nose. Right. And then to the late 1900s where you're saying, let's make them, young women or, make huge series off of them.
Exactly.
So I think that the decline of witch hunts was a quicker process than some people might realize. Yeah. Because of how the laws changed and then other things around the world were happening. It was very fast. Mm-hmm. And then over time, we look back at it now and it's kind of like a funnier thing, but obviously to the people at the time, it was not.
Exactly. It was very serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, those people like fully 100% believed in that sort of stuff. Like, we look at it now and we're like, oh, well, that's...
Yeah, we have it on our cartoons.
She wasn't like turning people into horses and stuff. But
exactly.
Like, back then, it's like, oh God, I think she was turning people into horses.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so that's kind of how we brought it up to modern time, and we'll pass it on here to Gus.
So, as the world continues to turn and modernize, there has been quite a surge of witches within modern media.
Yes.
As Mason had mentioned, they'd been, portrayed as green-skinned, big-nosed, evil little guys. Like we mentioned, the Wizard of Oz with the Wicked Witch of the West.
Yes.
But obviously it's changed very much. There's multiple media outlets involving witches, like you mentioned, Harry Potter, Hocus Pocus, Charmed.
Yes.
Does anybody remember Twitches?
I actually just rewatched that.
Oh my
last
God.
month for Halloween. It was so good.
I don't know what Twitches is.
Really?
Weren't they
they're twins.
They were lost at birth or something, but like they were separated at birth.
Yes.
And
because there's like an evil force after them. They're separated at birth and put into like a different universe so that they can get away from this evil source, and then they have to go back and like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's great. You gotta.
It was very like, what was that, like 2000s?
Yes.
Early
yes,
2000s.
Yes. This is around the same time as like Cheetah Girls and stuff. Like, it was,
I loved Cheetah Girls.
Yeah.
I can say that for sure.
But like with Twitches, that was how they were like slowly discovering their powers, kind of putting it on the idea, which I think they did something similar with Harry Potter too, putting on the idea of you are a witch, but you don't know until you get this certain age. Yes.
And I feel like it's like with this, it's like you're born a witch. You don't make a pact with the devil.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like they're portraying witches now, and I guess like wizards or whatever, in modern media as more of a sort of like kind of just everyday people, but there's just magic involved. Yeah. It's just fantasy.
It's almost like superheroes just kind of get their powers. It's less satanic, I guess, than what they kind of
Yeah.
Like Superman just ended up like that.
Yeah.
Like there's no, he did not make a pact with the devil.
Right. It wasn't of their own choice. It just happened.
Right. Also, like Hocus Pocus, I think, is one that also kind of touches on the old hag stereotype, but in a different way.
Yes,
because in that they're just like, they need the souls of the children to be young, or yes, I said that correct.
Yes,
and they're kind of incompetent, right?
Well, they also aren't the Hocus Pocus witches from back when witch trials were taking place.
Yes. And they're also like you said, they're kind of incompetent. Yeah. Like Winnie's the only really smart one.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's also like a bit of comedy added to that.
Yeah.
Which I think is something that, these people gotta lighten up a little. Like, okay, who cares if she turned your husband into a horse? It's kind of funny.
Yes.
He's okay now.
He's okay now.
You brought him back at the end of the night.
My favorite part of Hocus Pocus 2 is the fact that they have to use like modern appliances as their broomsticks, and the one has 2 Roombas that she has to ride on.
Like in the movie when she had to ride on the vacuum cleaner.
Yes.
Which I also think is very like, just a little like spin on that.
Yes, I think one is a Swiffer mop too.
That's really funny. But one thing I have come to notice when it comes to modern portrayals of witchcraft is it's a lot of like women empowerment and a lot of like pushing back against misogyny, because as we know, women historically have been treated like garbage. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. Like, and I can hear one person, well, actually there were males in the witch trials. Yes. But there were like, what, 4?
Yes,
5?
yes.
And
maybe?
Several of them were just like protecting their wife or
Yeah.
their mom.
Yeah, right.
So it's not even like they were accused of being a witch. They were just killed by association with
Right.
the woman witch.
Exactly.
Yes, because they were like, hey guys, my wife's not a witch. And everyone was like, only a witch would say that.
He's harboring one.
Someone whose wife's a witch would say that.
Husband of witch says what? What?
Because like you said with the Hannah, I forget that they can't see us, with the like, how would you tell that somebody's a witch?
Yes.
A lot of the times it was just women who were just, a little not like by the book, essentially.
Exactly.
Widowed, old, etc. And I have noticed actually I saw it on TikTok, but a lot of people are using the phrase, they didn't burn witches, they burnt women, as a way to sort of like fight back against misogyny and, not let the women who suffered those trials be forgotten. Because at the end of the day, we can talk about religion and possibly the idea of mental illness, but there always has to be that acknowledgement that a lot of it was misogyny.
Yes.
Speaking of which, so the series Good Omens, wonderful book, 2 seasons on Netflix, or not Netflix, Amazon Prime, very good.
Oh.
But this series actually does have a quite famous witch that it was in the witch trials, and that is Agnes Nutter.
Oh, yes.
She is actually a witch, and she does get burnt at the stake. However, she put gunpowder and nails in little sacks around her feet. So when she did get burnt, all of them blew up. But she was accused because she could predict the future.
Oh, okay.
And her great granddaughter is also a witch, and she ends up using her great times 4 grandmother's book in order to stop the end of the world. They also do have a funny little quip where the narrator says, most people believe that witches would perform their practices naked. That's because most books written by witchcraft were men.
Yes.
Which,
Yes.
Another British show that also does surprisingly talk about witches a lot. There's 5 episodes. Doctor Who.
I love Doctor Who.
I've never seen it. Actually.
It is.
I hadn't even
So
told you to watch it.
I know.
And since it's a science fiction show, obviously the quote-unquote magic doesn't exist. It's just alien technology that the humans of the time don't understand.
Right.
But an episode from 2017 caught my eye, which was Series 11's The Witchfinders. So in this episode, we follow Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor, and her companions travel back in time to 17th century Lancashire, I think. Yeah. During the witch trials near Pendle Hill. So this episode was based off of the actual Pendle Hill witch trials, where 12 people, including 2 men, were accused of witchcraft. And these accusations, of course, range from cursing neighbors to selling souls. 2 women actually admitted to doing that. And then 1 died in custody, while 10 out of the 11 were executed. And one important thing to mention is the fact that the actress playing the Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, is a woman. And if you don't know Doctor Who, that show has been going on since 1963. It's a very old, very, British TV show.
A great show.
Very great show,
Yeah.
I will say. It's one of those shows where it's so stupid, but I love it. And the Doctor had always been played by a man. So when Jodie Whittaker had actually gotten cast to play the Doctor, she didn't even get a chance to have her episode and her actual season start before she was immediately put down. Didn't even get a chance to play the Doctor because of how much misogyny was rampant. It was the whole thing of, she's a woman. She can't play the Doctor because he's always been a man.
Right.
Despite the fact that, he regenerates. He changes his body every time he dies.
Right.
And it kind of makes me laugh how that was also quite similar to going back to the original episode, The Witchfinders. It's quickly discovered that the quote-unquote witches are just alien species that are invading and freaking out the locals. Average Doctor Who episode. But nobody in the episode actually listens to the Doctor since she is presenting as a woman. She's even tried for witchcraft and dunked.
Oh my gosh.
Despite the fact that she's the one who knows what's going on and knows how to help them, nobody decides to listen to her because she's a woman, and they're only able to listen to her companion, Graham, who is a white man. And I... Sorry. So I feel as if a lot of the rise of modern witches in media and different representation of that has really been a way to empower women and sort of take back that misogyny.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I honestly really like shows about witches and that kind of stuff nowadays. And I do really like how much of a symbol of empowerment that they've become. And I think that they're so ingrained into our modern media with things like Harry Potter or with the new Wicked movie coming out with
Agatha All Along.
Yes, Agatha All Along.
Yeah.
And what was her... What's the other one?
Scarlet Witch.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
In, that show.
Yes.
I forget the name.
That I cannot remember now.
WandaVision.
WandaVision, yes.
I'm not an MCU fan.
Was so powerful. And I feel like there's a lot of even I don't know. I like how we've changed magic from being like so evil to kind of being a different symbol.
It's kind of being something like just beautiful.
Yeah,
in a way.
beautiful, good, like
Not every single depiction of magic has to be like, oh, I'm sacrificing a goat.
yes,
And
I'm eating babies.
I'm eating babies and I'm
Right.
cursing you.
Yeah.
And a lot
Yes.
of like the magic and witches and stuff are like working for the good. Like they're on
Exactly,
the
yeah.
good side.
Yes,
as opposed
or
to-
they're fighting someone like some big evil power.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they're fighting against somebody who would originally have been perceived as on the team, so to
Yeah.
speak, with the witch.
Yes. yes.
In this Doctor Who episode, they actually have somebody play King James the First.
Oh.
Oh my God, Alan Cumming it was actually.
Oh.
And like I know it's serious, but the way he played it, it was very campy and very silly.
Mhm.
But King James the First was very, superstitious
Yes.
about witches and everything. And,
Yes. I mean, as we know, he had witches try to kill him.
oh yes, yes,
Yes.
He was very paranoid about it, but
Oh, yes.
that's also made, that's also brought up as well in the episode about.
Mhm.
But
It's quite interesting. It is. It really is. And I mean, I guess this is not to say that misogyny doesn't exist still. And there are still people who very much so believe witchcraft is the work of the devil and is evil
oh yes,
and try to villainize it.
American Christians.
Yes. But it's not like as big as it was back then, like
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who don't believe in that anymore. So
Yeah, especially just never mind, had a brain fart. Ignore that.
And I feel like, there are still we watched that clip about Kamala Harris being accused of being
absolutely.
a witch, and there is still that stuff, but at least nowadays people can look at that and be like, well, you're just stupid. Like, what are you doing?
Thankfully now we do live in a time where any person with just a single brain cell
Yes.
would go, what the are you talking about?
Yes. Yeah. So I guess that is the conclusion of our podcast.
Yes. Thank you for listening, all of our 1 million fans out there. We love you guys. New merch will be on the store this weekend. Check out the link in the bio.
Shout out to our sponsor, Blaze Alexander Toyota. Really appreciate it. Once again, thank
Shout
you.
out to our sponsor.
Alexander Family Dealerships. What a way to roll.
And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.
Subscribe to the Patreon. We got a new tier coming out where Hannah and I just yell at you to do your homework.